This is Lori Barnes. I'm back with another video for you on the new moon in Taurus. So we have a new moon coming up May 19th, this Friday. I'll give you the times. If you're living on the west coast of the US, it'll be at 8:53 a.m. in the morning. And if you're on the East Coast, it'll be at 11:53 a.m. in the morning. And if you're in Rome, Italy, where I am, it'll be in the evening around 5:53 p.m. This Friday, May 19th. Now, if you remember, we had the eclipse season behind us. So we had a solar eclipse on April 20th, and then we had a lunar eclipse on May 5th. And we had a Mercury retrograde. So now we're coming out of this time period and into a new one with the new moon. There's a few interesting things going on at the new moon. Mars, at the same time as the new moon, is going to be at 29 degrees Cancer. So it's just getting ready to leave the sign and go into the next sign of Leo. And why that is important is because the solar eclipse back on April 20th was at 29 degrees Aries. And so Aries and Cancer are in a configuration called a square. It's a 90-degree angle, and there's some tension around that. And when we see Mars coming along to the same place that an eclipse happened, it's kind of like an activation or a triggering of that energy. So if you do have planets or sensitive points like your ascendant or your midheaven at a cardinal sign, so the cardinal signs are Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries. Aries was the sign of the eclipse. Those are sensitive points in your chart that will be activated by Mars, by square, on the new moon, and also the eclipse. So if you have planets or sensitive points in that location, not only is the Mars moving through this part of Cancer going to trigger or activate that part of your chart, it's also activating that solar eclipse. And that solar eclipse would have been significant for you if you do have planets around, 27, 28, 29 degrees of those four cardinal signs that I mentioned. So I'll say it once again: Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. So that's something to note at this new moon. The other really important thing is that Mercury went direct. It went direct on May 14th. The sign that Mercury was retrograde in is Taurus. So the whole Mercury retrograde was in Taurus. It didn't cross over signs. And now we have a new moon in Taurus. And we also have Jupiter just entered the sign of Taurus on May 16th. So there's all this activity happening in Taurus, which is really important because we all have Taurus somewhere in our charts. So hopefully you have your chart and you can take a look at where is Taurus, what house does Taurus occupy, because that's going to give you more information as to the topics, the people, the themes that could come up for you at the new moon, and probably have already had things come up in those areas of life because of the Mercury retrograde. If it was in your first house, like you're a Taurus rising, then it's going to really have to do with you, and maybe you're making changes to your appearance. And if Taurus is on your second house, then it'll have to do with your income and your value system. And if you have Taurus on your third house, it'll have to do with communication and people near you, like your colleagues. And it has to do with siblings as well. But if you don't live anywhere near your siblings, it may have more to do with your colleagues or your peers. And if Taurus is your fourth house, it'll have to do with your home. And fifth house, it'll have to do with your individual expression, your creativity, how you take pleasure in life, and your kids, if you have them. Sixth house is your day-to-day routine, your work. It could have something to do with your health. And seventh house is your relationships, whether it's a romantic partner or a business partner. It has to do with contracts. Eighth house has to do with other people's resources. And ninth house has to do with foreigners, foreign affairs, or your higher belief system, philosophy, and higher education. 10th house is your work, your career, your calling, your public life. 11th house is your network, your friends, organizations that you're part of, can have to do with, marketing too, and how you network and get in touch with others. And then the 12th house has to do with your shadow side, whether it's addiction, or it can be a house of where you go deeper into your spirituality. So I hope that helps you kind of see where this Taurus energy is happening in your life so that you can really think about like, okay, I know it's in my 5th house. So what's going on for me? What came up under this Mercury retrograde, which the shadow started April 7th. The actual retrograde started on April 21st, and then it just went direct in May on the 14th. I really think that this new moon is about picking up and moving forward now that we've made it through the retrograde and we've made it through the eclipse season. We're coming out of all this. Things are shifting. We have planets that are changing signs. Like Jupiter just went into Taurus, and now we'll have Jupiter in this part of our chart for a year, and that's significant. So looking at the Taurus part of your chart, not just for this new moon, but for Jupiter coming and will stay in this part of your chart for a year, and it can help expand and grow this part of your chart. It can bring some optimism and some opportunity to this part of your chart. So these are important things that are happening at the new moon. And we want to take into consideration all of the things that are happening together and not just look at the new moon by itself in a vacuum, because all the planets are working together and activating parts of our chart. And of course, we are complex human beings, so our chart represents all the different things going on with us. So we have this new moon in Taurus. We want to look to what part of the chart where Taurus is, and then be aware of all the activities. So there's other things going on in Taurus. That's not even everything. We also have Uranus and Mercury, both in Taurus. Now, Uranus has been in Taurus for quite a while. And if you've been following astrology, you know that Uranus was pretty active with Saturn a couple of years ago, and that has kind of passed over. And now we have Uranus in Taurus still, and it's making contact with Mercury. Now, they're not super close, but Mercury is heading in the direction of Uranus now. So it went retrograde, and now it's going back towards Uranus. So it's kind of like a time of a lot of mental activity as it relates to the Taurus part of your chart. So, you know, looking at a house, let's say it's Uranus and Mercury together in the 3rd house, there could be like an amazing amount of ideas that you have for teaching, or maybe you're learning something and you're taking in all kinds of new concepts, and you're then taking that information and getting it ready to go back out of you, back out into the world. And that's pretty exciting. So there's just a lot of activity in the Taurus part of your chart. All 7 of the personal planets, which include the sun and the moon, they're technically not planets, they're lights. And then Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, those 7 bodies are all in earth or water signs. So that means that they're all in sextile to each other. And this is a really flowing type of new moon. All the planets are really connecting on a supportive wavelength. There's no squares or oppositions between the 7 planets. There's some conjunctions because there's so many planets in Taurus, but they're all working together quite nicely. So that's a great energy to tap into as we go into the new moon. The things from the past that now with the Mercury retrograde going direct, that we can start moving those things forward, and we have the planets working together quite nicely. There is also Neptune that is involved. And when Neptune comes into place, then things can be less clear. They can be foggy. There can be, on the worst case, deception and illusion. On the better kind of vibe is that there's more of a spiritual and mystical quality, or an ability to tap into your instincts and to your creativity. I think that there's a lot of intuition and instincts that we can tap into to help us kind of figure out which way to go. It can be that there's all this great energy, the planets are working together, but also like a lack of clarity as to what to do or where to go, or how to take the pieces that got broken apart during the Mercury retrograde and put them back together in a way that's going to work better for you moving forward. And my advice is to tap into your instincts, tap into your intuition. That's going to help more than trying to do things in a very pragmatic way. Even though Taurus is an earth sign, it's a very grounded sign. It's kind of like it wants to see the facts. It wants to do things in a very material way. But I think you're going to find that when you use both your instincts and your intuition, along with grounded, practical methods of doing things, it's going to work better than just trying to stick in the practical. What I see in front of me that's what's real. But if I can't see it, touch it, feel it, it's not there. Well, you may be missing out on something. So kind of using both your intuition and your instincts and your grounding and your pragmatic skills all together. There are some sign changes that are coming up. I mentioned already Jupiter is in Taurus now, and that happened on May 16th. Mars goes into Leo on May 20th, shortly after the new moon. And that's important because, as I mentioned earlier, Mars activates the 29 degrees cardinal point, and it activates that solar eclipse point by square. And then as soon as it moves into Leo, it's going to be exactly opposite Pluto, which recently moved into Aquarius. So there is maybe a bit of uncomfortable energy that does happen shortly after the new moon. And so you would want to check your chart and see if you have anything in the earliest degree of the fixed signs. So that would be Leo and Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio. So if you have any planets in the very early degrees, like 0, 1, 2 degrees, then something in your chart's being activated, and that can be more uncomfortable. It can have some power plays. Pluto has to do with power. Mars is about how you take action and, kind of like your inner determination, your inner will, your drive, but then also how you go out and do things. And with these two planets across from each other, there can be some problems as it comes to power, whether it's somebody having power over you, you having power over someone else, or you empower. So empowerment is the best way to use that energy. And if you get into any kind of highly argumentative situation, you're better off finding a way to diffuse it, to step out of it. If you're really activated and triggered and you go at it more aggressively, then that's when it can become more dangerous. So, try to watch out for any kind of situations that seem to escalate, and try to pull yourself out of it and find other ways to work with it, or just give it some time. Let Mars get away from that degree where it's across from Pluto, and that will hopefully diffuse the situation a bit. The other, it's not a planet, it's the sun. The sun is moving into Gemini on May the 21st. And when it does that, it's going to hopefully help smooth the way for any irritating, agitating kind of situations that come up from Mars across from Pluto, because the sun, when it moves into Gemini, is going to sextile Mars, and it's going to trine Pluto. And so hopefully that will bring some energy into the situation that, shines the light on some solution to the problem, but eases things down, kind of like brings things down a little bit. It's the sun, so it's still like a very strong, powerful body, but the type of relationship is an easier, more flowing type of relationship than that opposition. Okay, so I hope that you have a great new moon. It's going to be, I think, a perfect time to start moving things forward now that we're past the retrograde. So whatever themes were coming up for you during the retrograde, those are areas that I'd say now you have a chance to really move those things forward. Taurus is a very fertile sign, and there's lots of activity there. So please get a copy of your chart if you don't have one. You can find online generators that will make your chart for free. You just need your birth time, date, and location, and then look and see what house Taurus occupies. And that's going to give you more information about the parts of life that are activated and highlighted at this time. And I have an article that explains the houses and the rising sign, so I will link to that below. Today's quote's from Oprah Winfrey, who says, "Follow your instincts. That's where true wisdom manifests itself." So I hope that you find wisdom in this new moon and coming out of the Mercury retrograde, and I will see you next time. If you want to set up an appointment with me, I'm available at Lori Barnes Astrology. Ciao.